I want you to try something for me real quick. Close your eyes for a second.
Unless you're driving.
Right, yeah. Please do not close your eyes if you are operating a motor vehicle. But if you're not, picture your local coffee shop. You know the one.
Oh, yeah, we all have one.
Exactly. You go there maybe 3 or 4 times a week. You walk in, the bell on the door chimes, and the barista looks up. And they don't just give you that, that standard retail customer service nod.
The polite blank stare.
Right. Instead, they smile, they grab a Sharpie, and they start writing your name on a cup before you've even said a single word. They know your order. They know you. How does that feel?
It feels really good. Safe, maybe.
Yeah.
It's a moment of belonging.
Yeah.
It's basically this biological signal to your brain that says, I am seen and I am safe in this environment.
It's cozy. It makes you feel like a regular. But now, and stick with me here, I want to tweak the simulation just a bit.
Okay.
Imagine that same barista knows what you whispered to your partner during that really nasty argument last night.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Imagine they know exactly how much consumer debt you are carrying on the credit card you just handed across the counter. Imagine they know that super petty, judgmental thought you had about your coworker on the commute this morning.
Yikes.
Right. Suddenly, that feeling of being known isn't so cozy anymore, is it?
No, not at all. That's no longer belonging. That is, well, that feels like surveillance. It feels like a massive violation.
Exactly. And that emotional whiplash going from this desperate desire to be known to the absolute terror of being fully exposed is exactly where we are parking the bus today.
It's a huge topic.
It really is.
Yeah.
Today, we are doing a deep dive into a really fascinating sermon. This was delivered back in September 2025 by Philip Gibson, and it's titled The Relentless Love of the Trustworthy Knower.
And I know what some of you are probably thinking right now. A sermon. Are we suddenly doing Sunday school?
Right.
But seriously, stay with us on this one. Because whether you consider yourself religious or spiritual or honestly just interested in human psychology, Gibson is unpacking something so fundamental to all of us here.
Yeah, he uses a specific text as his foundation, Psalm 139, which is this piece of ancient Hebrew poetry. But he uses it to analyze the modern surveillance state, the psychology of shame, and this is the crazy part, somehow he ties it all into river conservation.
It is an incredibly eclectic mix.
Totally.
He manages to weave together high-level theology with a classic children's book about a bunny, along with his own time working as an environmental activist.
Yeah.
But the core mission of our deep dive today is to really figure out this universal human paradox. Why do we so desperately want to be understood by others, but simultaneously spend so much energy hiding who we really are?
It's the human condition in a nutshell, isn't it? We crave intimacy, but intimacy requires vulnerability. And vulnerability feels deeply dangerous. So Gibson's main argument is that we actually have to reframe who is doing the watching.
Let's go back to that coffee shop feeling for a second. Because Gibson starts his message right there with the sheer relief of being known.
Yeah, he talks about how deeply satisfying it is when a close friend hears your voice on the phone, like you just say hello, and they immediately ask, what's wrong?
Because they know the tone. They know the subtle data points of your life. And Gibson anchors this exact feeling in the opening lines of Psalm 139.
Right.
The text says, "O Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know when I sit down and when I rise up."
Which, if you just look at it on the surface, sounds incredibly mundane. When I sit down, it's not exactly this epic, my destiny to save the galaxy kind of statement.
Right.
It's more like, when I flop onto the couch to scroll on my phone.
But I think that's his whole point. It's the intimacy of the ordinary.
Yeah.
We live in a world where people feel so invisible. You can walk through a crowded downtown street and feel completely isolated. So the idea that a creator is tracking the tiny, boring, everyday rhythms of your life is actually a powerful anchor. It completely validates your existence.
Okay, but here's where I think we need to pause and get a little technical for a second. Because Gibson hints at a theological concept here that we definitely need to define properly for the deep dive. He talks about this knowledge being there before we even think to ask for it.
Right. So in the Wesleyan tradition, which is the specific theological framework Gibson is operating in here, this is called prevenient grace.
Prevenient. That is definitely a $10 seminary word. Break that down for us.
It comes from the Latin word prevenire, which means to go before.
Okay.
It basically means the grace that is active in your life before you are even aware of it. So before you ever decide to find God, or turn your life around, or whatever language you prefer to use. This concept says the knower is already there.
So you don't have to flag God down like a taxi on a busy street.
Exactly. The knowledge and the care are preloaded into the relationship.
Which sounds lovely. It's very warm and fuzzy, but this is exactly where Gibson pulls the rug out from under the audience.
Oh.
Because if someone knows everything, if the knowledge is fully preloaded, then they also know all the stuff you desperately don't want them to know. And Gibson shares a personal story here that I found just really compelling.
The Asheville story.
Yeah. He talks about how he used to be the French Broad river keeper in Asheville, North Carolina.
Which is a very public, very visible role in that community.
Huge. He says in a span of just 4 years, he was featured in the local newspaper 150 times.
Wow.
He joked that he couldn't even go to the grocery store to buy a gallon of milk without people stopping him in the dairy aisle to talk about water quality or industrial pollution. He was a bona fide public figure. Everyone knew him.
But did they actually know him?
Well, that's the crucial distinction he makes. He says in the sermon, "I could not hide, but they only thought they knew me."
And that is such an important point. They knew the persona. They knew the riverkeeper guy. They didn't know the man who maybe lost his temper with his kids that morning, or the man who was struggling quietly with massive insecurity. Gibson argues that deep knowledge, like true intimacy, requires the other person to know the data points you definitely aren't putting in your press release.
He actually lists some of those out, the quirks, the habits, the failures. He mentions the sharp words we wish we could take back, the deep doubts we keep hidden from everyone. And I think this is exactly where the terror part of the episode title comes into play.
Absolutely, because if you believe in a God, or really any higher entity who knows everything, not just your curated Instagram highlights with your unfiltered internal monologue, that can feel incredibly threatening.
Yeah.
It heavily triggers what psychologists call the spotlight effect.
The spotlight effect.
Yeah, it's a psychological phenomenon where we constantly overestimate how much other people notice our flaws or mistakes.
Like thinking everyone is staring at the coffee stain on your shirt.
Exactly. But in this specific theological context, Gibson is saying it's not an overestimation at all. The central claim of Psalm 139 is that the spotlight is literally always on. He talks about how some people hear the verse where it says, "You hem me in, behind and before." And they don't hear that as a comforting hug. They hear it as a trap.
Yeah, hemming me in sounds like a military tactic, like you're being cornered in an alley.
Exactly. If your mental image of this knower is a judge or a cosmic cop just looking for enough evidence to convict you, then Psalm 139 is basically a horror story.
It's the ultimate surveillance state.
It is. It's Big Brother with infinite cloud storage capacity.
So how does he flip it? Because the whole premise of this deep dive, the whole point of the sermon is that this is relentless love, not relentless stalking. How do we make that mental move from feeling like a prime suspect to feeling like a beloved child?
He has to completely reframe the nature of the gaze itself. He argues that we are fundamentally confusing surveillance with agape.
Agape, that's the ancient Greek term for unconditional love, right?
Right. It's a self-giving love that actively seeks the best for the other person. Gibson says we have to stop imagining a stern judge with a clipboard just ticking off our sins and start imagining a parent who is absolutely obsessed in a totally healthy, nurturing way with their child.
Or like a partner who just finds every little thing about you fascinating.
Yes. The logic he presents is this. God sees the sin. God sees the moral failure. God sees the consumer credit card debt and that nasty petty thought about your coworker.
Right.
But the purpose of seeing all of that isn't to build a legal case against you. The purpose is to heal you.
And this connects back to another one of those specific grace terms, doesn't it?
It does. This is what the Wesleyan tradition calls justifying grace.
Okay.
It's that exact moment where you are fully known, all your flaws out on the table, and yet you are fully accepted. It's the complete knowledge of who we really are, permanently joined with mercy.
So it's like the barista knowing you just screamed at your partner in the car, and instead of judging you or giving you a dirty look, they just hand you your coffee with a kind smile and ask if you're doing okay today.
That is the perfect modern equivalent, yes.
Now, to really illustrate this, Gibson goes to a source that I have to admit I did not see coming at all.
Of the book.
Yeah, I'm expecting a quote from some dense theologian, maybe C.S. Lewis or St. Augustine, but instead he pulls out Margaret Wise Brown.
The Runaway Bunny.
Yes, the 1942 children's classic picture book. I hadn't thought about this book in probably 30 years. why on earth is he using a toddler's picture book to explain ancient Hebrew poetry?
Because it is actually a flawless theological metaphor for what he's talking about.
Okay, break it down for us.
So for anyone who hasn't read it recently, the entire story is just a dialogue. A little bunny is basically testing the boundaries of his relationship with his mother. He says, I'm going to run away. He is actively initiating a separation.
And the mother doesn't get angry. She doesn't yell at him. She doesn't say, well, you're grounded for a week. Or even, fine, good luck out there in the real world. She just casually plays along.
Right. She fully enters his hypothetical world. The little bunny says, if you run after me, I will become a fish in a trout stream. And the mother just replies, if you become a fish, I will become a fisherman and I will fish for you.
And it just keeps escalating from there. It actually gets kind of absurd. He says, I'll become a rock on a mountain. And she says, well, I'll be a mountain climber.
Yeah.
He says, I'll be a bird. She says, I'll be a tree that you come home to. It borders on obsessive behavior.
It is obsessive. That is exactly the relentless part of the sermon's title. But you have to look at the underlying intent. Is she chasing this bunny to punish him for trying to run away?
No.
No, she is literally shape-shifting into whatever she needs to be to reach wherever he goes, just to ensure he is never actually alone. And Gibson uses this specific dynamic to explain sanctifying grace.
Okay, let's define that one too. We've had prevenient grace, which goes before. We had justifying grace, which accepts you exactly as you are right now. What is sanctifying grace?
Sanctifying grace is the ongoing pursuit. It's the long-term process. It's the type of love that doesn't just save you once and walk away, but it keeps shaping you. It keeps chasing you up the mountain or diving into the trout stream after you. It's the radical idea that God is willing to go to completely absurd lengths just to maintain the connection with you.
The punchline of the children's book is honestly the best part, though.
Oh, absolutely.
The bunny eventually just runs out of ideas. He realizes he literally cannot outimagine his mother's sheer persistence. So he just gives up and says, shucks, I might just as well stay where I am and be your little bunny.
And do you remember what the mother says? She simply says, have a carrot.
Have a carrot. It's so jarringly normal.
Because it completely resolves the tension.
Yeah.
There is no heavy moral lecture. There's no, I told you so, just a calm return to the relationship.
Yeah.
That is the trustworthy knower that Gibson is talking about. It's a love that simply won't let you go. Not because it wants to control your every move, but because it absolutely refuses to abandon you.
So we've got the coffee shop barista, the Asheville Riverkeeper, and the Runaway Bunny. But Gibson then takes this core idea of being known and applies it to the absolute extremes of real human life. Because it's one thing to talk about cute bunnies. It's an entirely different thing to talk about deep human tragedy.
Right. This isn't just nursery rhyme theology. Gibson intentionally moves through this broad spectrum of scenarios to show that this concept of knowing holds up even in the darkest possible places.
Yeah.
He talks about standing at a graveside.
He quotes that heavy verse from the Psalm, "In your book were written all the days that were formed for me."
Think about hearing that in the context of a funeral. It suggests that a life, no matter how short it was or how obscure it seemed to the world, was permanently recorded. It mattered deeply. It wasn't just lost to the void.
And then he mentions the heartbreaking loss of a child, using the verse, "You knit me together in my mother's womb."
That one hits incredibly hard. It's this profound acknowledgement of inherent value, even when that life is completely unseen by the rest of the world.
And then he brings up the prison cell. This was honestly the most striking image to me in the whole deep dive. Gibson imagines a person sitting in a prison cell hearing the words, "Your eyes beheld my unformed substance."
Meaning, God sees the person before the crime ever took place.
Exactly. Even when you are locked in a cage, stripped of your freedom, perhaps stripped of your dignity by the state, and labeled permanently as a criminal by society, the knower sees the unformed substance, the core humanity.
Right.
That fundamental identity completely predates the criminal record.
That is such a radical way to look at human beings.
It really is. And then almost just to give the audience a breather from all that heavy stuff, he takes us to the beach. He uses the verse, "I try to count your thoughts, and they are more than the sand."
It's that overwhelming sense of scale, being dwarfed by the sheer size of God.
And this brings up a really important balance that Gibson insists on maintaining. He brings in another heavy hitter here, the theologian Sally McFaig. She talks extensively about the balance between transcendence and immanence. I feel like we need to unpack those terms too, because they sound like complete opposites.
They are opposites in a way. Transcendence basically means God is big. God is far away, holding the entire universe together, having thoughts that outnumber all the grains of sand on earth. God is the mountain climber.
Okay.
Imminence, on the other hand, means God is close. God is actively knitting you together in the womb. God is the tree you come home to rest in.
And why does Sally McFaig and Gibson, by extension, say we need to be really careful with these concepts?
Because she warns against adopting a purely passive interpretation of the big transcendent God. It's super tempting to look at this all-knowing, all-powerful God and say, well, if God knows everything and is literally everywhere, I could just sit back on the couch. God's got this.
It's that classic let go and let God bumper sticker theology.
Exactly. But Gibson forcefully argues that kind of thinking is actually dangerous. He says God's infinite knowing does not somehow cancel out our human responsibility.
Right.
Things like systemic poverty, deep injustice, violence, terminal disease, these things still desperately require our hands to fix.
I really liked the specific phrase he used for this. He said, God is powerful enough to hold the universe and personal enough to hold our tears.
Because that implies a real partnership. We're being invited into that restorative work, not just being replaced by it. It empowers our human agency rather than removing it.
Now, this perfectly leads us into the final section of the message, which I think is really the main. So, what of our deep dive today? Because it's one thing to sit around and feel good about being intimately known.
Sure.
It's another thing entirely to let that knowledge fundamentally change how you act in the real world. Gibson focuses on that incredibly famous verse from Psalm 139. I am fearfully and wonderfully made.
Verse 14.
Yeah.
You see that one on greeting cards, on coffee mugs, and Instagram bios? It's so often used as just a quick self-esteem booster.
Right, like a daily mirror affirmation. I am wonderful. But Gibson completely shifts the source of that identity. He says our core identity isn't based on what the world says about us.
Like the river keeper with his stack of newspaper clippings.
Exactly. And it's not even based on what we say about ourselves. It is exclusively based on what the Creator says.
And that is a crucial anchor point. If your identity is based on what the world says, it constantly fluctuates. One day you're a celebrated hero, and the next day you make a mistake and you're canceled.
Yeah.
If your identity is based purely on what you feel about yourself, well, that fluctuates with your daily mood or your serotonin levels. But if it's based on being wonderfully made by a trustworthy knower, it becomes completely fixed. It's an objective fact of the universe, not a subjective daily feeling.
But then, and this is the absolute kicker of the sermon, he flips this whole concept outward. This isn't just about me feeling special and loved.
This is the massive ethical pivot. And honestly, it's the hardest part of the entire sermon to swallow. Gibson argues that if you are fearfully and wonderfully made, basic logic dictates that everyone else around you is too.
Even the guy who aggressively cuts you off in morning traffic.
Even him.
Even the person on the complete opposite side of the political aisle, whatever side of the aisle you happen to be on, the person you think is actively trying to ruin the country.
Yep, them too.
Even the person sleeping under a bridge downtown who the rest of society tries so hard to just ignore.
Especially them. Gibson says, God's knowing calls us to a radically new way of seeing. If we actually truly believe the words of Psalm 139, we immediately lose the luxury of writing other people off.
Wow.
We lose the luxury of dehumanizing our political or personal enemies. We are forced to view our neighbors through the exact same lens of God's perfect love.
I mean, that sounds almost impossible.
It definitely feels impossible on most days. But this connects to the final Wesleyan concept Gibson brings up, Christian perfection.
Which definitely sounds like never making a single mistake ever again. But I assume that's not what it actually means.
No, thankfully not. In the Wesleyan sense, perfection is entirely about love. It means you are slowly growing in love to the point where your love for other people starts to look a little bit like God's love for you. It means your specific gaze starts to resemble the trustworthy knower's gaze.
Yeah.
You stop seeing a homeless guy on a corner and you start seeing unformed substance carefully knit together by God.
So it's not just an individual I am known, it shifts to a collective. We are known. And that completely rewrites the social contract.
Completely. It systematically dismantles all the artificial barriers we put up between us and them. You simply cannot hate someone if you deeply acknowledge they are the beloved creation of the exact same God who loves you.
That is a really heavy, really beautiful challenge. It takes the warm, cozy, fuzzy feeling of that bunny book and turns it into a rigorous, demanding social ethic.
It does. But real theology always should do exactly that.
So as we wrap up this deep dive today, Gibson brings us back to the Runaway Bunny one last time.
He does. He reminds the audience of the bunny's final realization. Shucks, I might as well stay.
And Gibson translates that simple phrase into a final piece of life advice for all of us. Stop running. Rest. Stay with God.
He says you cannot out-sin God's grace, and you cannot out-hide God's love.
Which is a massive relief, honestly. I think about the sheer exhaustion of trying to constantly curate a perfect image. Whether it's putting on a front on social media, pretending you have it all together at work, or even just lying to ourselves in our own heads, it's real. We are all so tired of constantly performing.
Oh yeah, we're exhausted.
The idea that there is a trustworthy knower who has already seen all the gritty behind-the-scenes footage, has watched the entire blooper reel of your life, and completely loves you anyway, that finally allows you to just exhale.
It does. It validates the deep human need for actual rest. Because true rest isn't just getting 8 hours of sleep. It's the total cessation of striving to prove you are worthy. You already are worthy.
So here is our final thought for you to chew on as you go about your day. We've spent this time talking about the paradox of deeply wanting to be known, but terrified of the exposure. Gibson suggests that being fully known is actually the required prerequisite for being fully loved.
Think about that for a second. You literally cannot be fully loved if you're actively hiding core parts of yourself.
Right.
Because then, even if someone looks at you and says, I love you, you'll always have that nagging voice in the back of your head saying, yeah, but if they knew the real me, would they actually stay?
That's the key right there. Hiding kills love because it constantly feeds our doubt.
Exactly.
So knowing that you are wondrously made, and knowing that this exact same truth applies to everyone else on the planet, who is one person in your life right now? Maybe someone who is difficult to deal with, maybe someone who feels completely invisible to you, that you need to start looking at differently. Who do you need to start seeing, not as an inconvenience or an enemy, but as someone who is also fully known and fully loved?
Answering that changes absolutely everything.
It really does. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.
We'll see you next time.